Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. The days after the meeting with James's parents passed quietly. Things were no longer as tense as before, but they could not yet be called light or easy. What needed to be said had been said. What could not yet be resolved was still there, silent, waiting. James realized that there are periods in life when people do not need more answers. They only need a pause, enough to breathe, enough not to be swept away by their own thoughts. It had been a long time since James had given himself a proper day of rest, and he thought Diep was the same. Diep was tidying up the familiar things around the house. Little Ly played nearby, fiddling with her toys and humming softly to herself. The rhythm of life was so slow that James suddenly felt his heart ease. He stood leaning against the doorway for a moment, then spoke the thought that had just crossed his mind, very softly, as if afraid of disturbing that rare quiet. How about we go out for a bit? Let's go fishing. Diep paused, looked up at him. Before she could say anything, Ly had already exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "Really, Uncle James? I've never gone fishing before." James laughed and nodded. No further explanation was needed. For James, this trip was not about changing anything big. He simply wanted the three of them to have a meaningful day together. James reopened an old bag he hadn't used in a long time. Inside were familiar items. A fishing rod worn smooth by his hands, an old bait box, a few tools bearing the marks of time. He checked each one slowly, without haste, as if every small movement helped ease the fatigue still lingering in his heart. In the kitchen, Diep was preparing food to bring along. Nothing elaborate, just simple dishes, easy to pack, easy to share. For Diep, this trip didn't need to be perfect. As long as they were together, that was enough. Little Ly was the most excited of all. She ran around the house asking all sorts of questions, sometimes wondering how long they would be gone, other times asking if the fish would be big, if there would be many of them. James watched her and nodded. Just hearing her cheerful, chattering voice was enough to soften his heart. "Remember to bring your jacket," Diep reminded gently. Ly nodded vigorously, replied, "Yes," and hugged her small backpack tightly to her chest, as if inside it was not just her belongings, but an entire adventure waiting ahead. They stopped beside a small stream. The water stretched out before them, calm and still. The stream did not rush, flowing slowly, just enough to hold the fading light of the sky as the day drew toward its end. The place was quiet, empty of people. Only the soft sound of water brushing against small stones and the gentle wind moving through the grass along the bank. James stood still for a moment. He took a deep breath, as if wanting to hold that cool freshness in his chest. Here, everything felt slower than he had imagined. There were no familiar sounds of work, no unfinished phone calls, only nature, present and complete. Diep set their things down in a patch of shade, her eyes quietly taking in the surroundings. She turned and gently reminded, "Ly, stay close, okay?" Ly nodded, though she couldn't hide her excitement. She ran about along the bank, bending down to pick up small pebbles, then gazing intently at the stream as if she were standing before an entirely new world. James spread out a mat near the water's edge. He set the fishing rod aside and carefully checked every small detail. Ly sat down beside Diep, dipping her hands into the water, making little circles that spread outward and disappeared almost instantly. Diep watched the child, then looked over at James. She smiled very softly, a rare and unfamiliar sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. James began guiding the two of them patiently and slowly, as if he didn't want to miss a single moment. He held the bait in his hand and showed them each step: how to attach it securely, how to hold the fishing rod so the hand wouldn't tire. His voice was steady, unhurried. Every word was gentle, enough to make the listener feel at ease and follow along. Diep sat beside him, carefully tying the fishing line. Her hands were skillful, following each step James showed. Her eyes were focused, her face calm, as if all the noise in her heart had temporarily settled. In that moment, Diep did not think about tomorrow, nor did she look back at what had passed. She was simply there, beside James, doing something very small, very ordinary. Ly was told to sit still. The child obediently sat near the bank, her legs gently swinging, eyes following every movement of the adults. From time to time, she glanced down at the water, waiting with curiosity, then looked back up at James as if wanting to ask something, but then fell silent, her eyes fixed on the stream, afraid that even a small sound might scare the fish away. When everything was ready, the two adults chose their spots along the stream. "You stay here, I'll go over there," James said softly, stepping a little farther away to where the water was deeper and calmer. Diep chose a spot near the bank, where the water flowed gently, clear enough to see each small ripple. The two fishing lines were cast. The surface of the water trembled slightly, then returned to stillness. They sat there, watching intently. No impatience, no expectation of anything grand. Even the slightest movement on the water was enough to draw their gaze. There weren't many fish. They waited quite a while before a small one finally bit. When it was pulled up, a tiny fish lay perfectly in the palm of the hand. Ly squealed with delight. Her laughter echoed through the mountains and forest. As the afternoon light began to fade, a chill quietly crept into the space by the stream. It was no longer the fleeting coolness of midday, but the distinct cold of late day, silently seeping into the skin, making one instinctively seek a bit of warmth to hold on to. James stood up first. He looked around for a moment, then quietly gathered the dry branches he had prepared earlier. It was time to make a fire. He crouched down and arranged each branch neatly. The movements were familiar, as if he had done this many times before in his life, at very different moments. Diep carried the fish down to the stream to wash them clean, then threaded them together for grilling. The cold water touched her hands, but she did not rush. Everything unfolded slowly, just enough to preserve the rare sense of calm from the afternoon as it slipped away. The fire caught gradually. At first, there were only small flames, trembling in the cold wind. Then slowly they steadied, giving off a gentle warmth. The firelight flickered, illuminating the faces of the three of them, making the vast space around them suddenly feel closer. Diep prepared the food. Nothing elaborate, just simple items they had brought from home. She placed a few sausages on the grill for Ly, knowing the child had been hungry for a while. She turned them gently, carefully keeping the flame just right. The smell of food cooking mixed with the thin smoke, spreading into the cold air and creating a very real sense of warmth. Ly ran around the fire, moving about with soft laughter. Sometimes she stopped to warm her hands, other times she bent down to pick up a small stone. James kept an eye on her every step, knowing Diep was busy. From time to time, he reminded her very softly when she stood too close to the fire, not with excessive worry, but with gentle care. Night fell faster than they had expected. The last light of day withdrew from the stream, leaving a soft gray stillness spreading over the small earthen bank. They sat closer together. No one mentioned heavy matters. No one spoke of the father. No one brought up the unresolved secrets. No one pulled the past back into the present. In that moment, they were simply there, by a small fire, in the cold of late day, allowing that rare peace to exist without needing to name it. Ly sat close to the fire, holding her hands out in front of her, focused on warming them. Her cheeks flushed pink in the firelight, her eyes following each flickering flame as if watching something both familiar and new. James stood behind for a moment, watching. He stepped closer, bent down, and gently lifted Ly into his arms. Ly, let's grill the fish together with Uncle James. He adjusted his position slowly, pulling her a little closer, then easing back when the heat felt just right. Ly leaned obediently against his chest. One hand reached out toward the fire, the other clutched the hem of James's shirt. That trust came naturally, as if it had been there for a very long time. James held her in his arms, his gaze never leaving her smallest movements. Without words, he was always there, close enough to protect, quiet enough not to interrupt the moment. Is the sausage good, Ly? Be careful, it's hot. Diep sat beside them, not stepping in, just smiling softly at the uncle and niece. She gently turned the fish on the grill, watching the flames carefully so they cooked evenly. The smell of grilled fish drifted through the cold air. In the firelight, her face softened, the traces of fatigue from the day seeming to settle quietly. The fire burned steadily. A wind came down from the mountains, carrying a chill, but the three of them had drawn closer together without even realizing it. Then, a very soft melody began. James sang slowly, his voice low and even, not needing to keep perfect time. Ly hummed along, remembering some lines, forgetting others. Diep did not sing. She simply sat there, letting the melody pass through her, like an invisible hand resting gently on her chest, warm enough to calm her trembling heart. The singing blended with the sound of flowing water, the soft crackle of wood in the fire, forming a rare pocket of stillness, where no one had to think about what came next. In that moment, there was no need to prepare for tomorrow, no need to touch the unfinished things. Just sitting together, in the cold night, listening to a very quiet song, was enough to soothe the heart. If you've stayed until this moment, perhaps the story has touched you in a very personal way. Leave a like as a gesture of empathy. And if you'd like to continue accompanying James, Diep, and little Ly on this very slow journey of healing, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. Thank you for listening until the very end.